I'm Lily Beth Warner, and today I'm going to be discussing case study number 18, The 5 Seasons of Salem. So many people know the city of Salem, Massachusetts. The city is known for mostly their iconic history of the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials were held in 1692, and it was when villagers accused nearly 200 townspeople of witchcraft, and they actually sentenced 19 people to death. So with a history like this, the city of Salem has many different opportunities for historical tourism. The city hosts many events to capitalize on their supernatural history as well. They host different haunted movie series, they do magic shows, they have haunted walking tours, and a plethora of different witch-associated activities. So, one may guess that the most popular time for tourism would be in October, specifically Halloween. So people come from all over to experience Salem's haunted attractions and witch-themed museums during the Halloween season. So the month is pretty popular for Salem tourism that all the locals consider it a fifth season because it brings so many people to Salem. And during 2011, the city officials for Salem decided that even though they loved their Halloween tourism and that the Halloween tourism is the biggest time of year, they wanted to branch out a little bit more and create more tourism for the city so that way it would be a year-round destination to go to. So the main point of this case study is to show how Salem uses public relations to create more tourism throughout the year. The city of Salem did this in a few ways, and they tried to they used a few different tactics to try to improve their tourism. The first one that they did was branding, but in this case, it was more of a rebranding because Salem was branded as a Halloween, October destination to see the witches, and then now they're trying to create a year-round. So they're trying to create a new brand that would allow tourism to start throughout the year. The first thing that they did was they decided to create two projects, and that would help them rebrand Salem. The first one was started by the mayor of Salem, Kimberly Driscoll. She helped start Destination Salem, and this was a partnership with the state of Massachusetts which publicized the businesses, events, and other resources that they had in Salem. They wanted to showcase everything Salem had to offer that was not just their Halloween attractions. So the Destination Salem team would distribute visitor and travel guides and city maps, not only locally, but they would deliver them to travel agents around the world so that way most people could figure out how to get to Salem and what events they had there. The Destination Salem team also would create the website called salem.org, which would then be the biggest resource for tourists to use while they're visiting Salem or planning their trip to visit Salem. The next project that the city did was they hired an advertising and marketing firm to create a brand that would work for all of Salem's industries, not just their Halloween industry. The marketing firm created a new tagline and logo for the city. So the tagline would be called Salem, Still Making History. And this was made so that way Salem, yes, they are having their historical past and you can go and experience that, but they're still making history now and the future. The logo that they made was an image that could be seen two ways. So the logo was a visual illusion that looked like a sailboat and a witch's hat. And so this logo would tie in both of Salem's major historical legacies, its historical seaport, and the witch trials, obviously. Salem wanted to bring to the attention that their seaport is one of the oldest in the United States, and most people don't even know about it because when they think Salem, they only think of the witch trials. So they really wanted to bring attention to their seaport and create more tourism for that. So had they implemented this logo and tagline, they implemented it in all of their advertising from the city to their radio, their print ads, they introduced it to their social media, and they introduced it to their email. So anything that had to do with Salem had these taglines and logos used in them. And so once the city created their new brand, they started to focus on consumer relations. And they did this by looking a little bit into the Boston tourism because that was their closest competitor and their easiest way to gain access to those people as well. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to research how people were getting to Boston. And they did this by finding out that Boston had mostly people from air travel, cruises, and most commonly was driving. So focusing on transportation, they found that the Boston airports had many visitors from Europe and Japan. So the Salem research team wanted to market to those people that Salem was a great travel destination that they could get to easily for the day, or if they were staying for the night, that they could easily travel to Salem. And so they did that by creating different itineraries for international visitors. So things that international visitors would be interested in, they created itineraries that would make them feel most connected to. And they implemented these advertisements in the Salem of Salem travel into the airports so that people could easily see once they got off the plane, see where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do for the day. And then the next form of transportation that they looked at was the cruise industry. The Salem team offered different cruise activities and programs that cruise goers could explore on their excursions. So when they got off of at Boston, they could easily find something to do in Salem. And lastly, they looked at how they could capitalize on the family travel that was happening around the area. So they decided to create family-friendly events and promote them through social media. They also discovered the types of people who were coming to Boston and how they could interest them in going to Salem. So the types of people coming to Boston were typically college-educated people, and they were white-collar professionals. So they had a lot of people who were coming to see the historical and cultural things that were happening at those specific locations. So they know that if they're interested in coming to Boston, they might be interested in coming to Salem as well. So when the Salem tourism team found out that the type of people that they were marketing to, it made it a lot easier for them to appeal to those potential visitors. And so they appealed to those potential visitors by using different communication tactics, specifically marketing and public relations tactics. So the main communication tactics they used were advertising, and they did this by focusing on target audiences. So the target audiences they looked at were people from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, as well as just staying in the Massachusetts area. They really wanted to keep that New England area is where they mostly directed their travel because they were the closest to them. So the next thing they focused on was media relations, and they did this by hosting different educational trips for travel writers and hosting different events where the media could come and get more exposure to Salem, and in return, Salem would get more exposure to the media. They also had their social medias, which created a bigger presence online for them, and they did this by creating a Facebook account and creating more events online so that they could reach their public that way. They also created e-newsletters, and they actually created two. They created one newsletter for the locals and one newsletter for the visitors. And they did this to kind of give their local people a way to promote their own events and to feel prepared for the events. And then they gave the visitors a newsletter to understand what's all happening at the events, what activities are going to be there, and what types of things they could do. And they also created a website, so they built their website so that way they could have one place where all their information could be shared easily. They had their press releases released on the website, and they also had their events, calendars, and easy access to information all on one place. And that website is salem.org. And then lastly, they created a way to reach to specific niche markets. So they would work to create individual itineraries for specific types of people, so that way everyone felt really included into their events. This case study was actually a really good example of relational management theory. So Salem wanted to create a new relationship with its tourists. They wanted to do this by promoting Salem's attractions and providing tourists with events and itineraries that they'd be interested in. So in basic terms, Salem was giving tourists things to do, so in return, the tourists would visit Salem. This is how they would create their relationship. The next theory I'm going to discuss is the diffusion theory. Diffusion theory is when people make decisions or accept ideas following a list of steps. The first two steps in this list are awareness and interest. In this case study, Salem creates its campaign, number one, to raise awareness about the city of Salem and its history, and then two, to create interest in visiting Salem year-round. And lastly, I'll discuss the press agentry model, and the press agentry model is when public information flows from one organization to its publics and its stakeholders, and the organization uses persuasion to achieve its goals. This case study is an example of Salem's goal because Salem had goals to rebrand its city to create a stable cycle of tourism year-round, and they aim to do this through one-way persuasive communication to its key publics. So how they did that is pretty much they had their goal that they were going to create this tourism year-round, and they did it by one-way communication. So they were using advertising, and they were using different ways to connect to their audience. They weren't really getting it back from their publics, but they were getting information out to their publics. Thank you so much.